What's up YouTube, Dale here from Zephyr, and today I am bringing you another Ryu-Ge update. This time it is involving True Draco. So we did just get the news that Masterpiece is going to be reprinted in the fourth and technical final Bonanza, which will be due out in April of 2025. Whether that means Masterpiece is going to come back or not, I don't know, but what it does mean is that with the Ryu-Ges readily available for everyone to play, it's another version of the deck that you can utilize. Quite like Dynamis, it's actually more of a control element deck, and what works really well is the Ryu-Ges give you the ability to get access to your worm monsters in the form of your Dynamite Knight, Majesty, or Ignister, and then on top of that as well, you have great control aspects through the back of the Dynamites, with all the access to the trap cards to dealing with monsters, the spells dealing with back row, and then you add all of that together, you start getting protection off of the back of the Ryu-Ges and everything else, and it gives you even stronger boss monsters and just free tribute fodder for as much as you could possibly ask for. So with all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell, and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more upcoming content. I'm going to take you through the profile, show you what we've got, explain why we've got it. I'll also show you the extra deck. Don't worry, this version is a little bit different to most versions of the True Dracos themselves. It does actually involve an extra deck, which limits some of the cards you can play, but then opens up the door to some of the other options you can play as well, mainly coming from the side deck, and I'll talk you through some options as we go. So starting off with the Ryu-Ges themselves, we are going to be playing 3 of the Sosai Ryu-Ge Mistava. So this is your ideal card for the Ryu-Ge elements. The best thing about this is it will drag out Ash Blossoms. The downside is it will get hurt with a Drow and Lockbird, which is something that a lot of people are considering playing in either their main deck or their side deck for this current format. So it's something you do need to be a little bit aware of. But the idea is straight from the Mistava, you work your way into 3 of your boss monsters. If you do activate a card, and the only card that we have in the main deck that will massively clash with accessing your extra deck will be the Monarch Stormforth. That's when you won't be able to bring out the Mistava during your turn, but it's still absolutely fine because you bring it out during your opponent's turn, and it still causes another interruption that a lot of people don't even consider or think about. We're then playing, of course, 3 of the Ryu-Ge Rising. This is the card that's going to lead you into the Mistava, and if it doesn't lead you into the Mistava, you're going to be going for your Hakva, because the Hakva is going to lead you to basically that technical Macrocosmo during your opponent's turn. So for the monsters, we are playing 2 of the Kaiva, 2 of the Hakva, and then the risk is the 1 Ember. Now the reason it's a risk is the only time that these cards are 100% dead is if you hard open them. So when you're only playing 1 of them, something like the Ember is very tricky to deal with because we're not playing the continuous water spell card. The reason we're not doing that is it only really provides you with the battle protection from your big boss monsters, and then it only provides you with the bounce effect, which is quite nice, but it's just one of them continuous spell cards you might not want to heavily rely on. That being said, if you wanted to, this deck is currently like a 45 card deck. If you can find the space for it, then add it in. You might want to consider playing 2 Ember, but having 1 at least does get a way of getting it out of the hand, which is the one thing that we will struggle with this particular build, is if you see the Ember, you're in a little bit of trouble because it does kill the entire engine, which is really annoying, but that's something you might want to consider or might want to change up depending on how you find it, and it might be something that I will change up as I go through and test this. I had to try and find ways of kind of cutting down the deck so it didn't become a 50 card deck and not lose all of its consistency, and that's why I decided to go with the 1 Ember instead, because once you've used it, so once you've got it in the graveyard and you're bringing it back from the graveyard or banishing it or anything like that, you're absolutely fine. Like, once it's not in your hand, you're in a great position because you just keep bringing it back with a field spell, you keep spamming the board with free level 10 3k boss monsters, and you're in Dreamland. We are playing 2 of the Ryu-Ge's Warzone. Now the reason we got 2 of this is because the other field spell in this deck that I'll quickly jump to is of course the most insane field spell for Dracos themselves, and that is of course Diagram. But we only have 1 Diagram. So it's one of them ones that with Warzone, what you want the ability for is, this unlocks the ability, and I might as well show you them now. It gives you the ability to play Set Rotation, and of course you'd already be playing Terraforming. But the idea is Set Rotation has a bit more consistency as long as you don't see the diagram. If you see the diagram, Set Rotation becomes dead, which is a bit of a downside, but you could also consider something like Metaverse as well. The idea is that if I get Warzone, which is a lot easier to get because I have more ways of searching it and getting me direct access to it, I then don't worry so much about replacing it with a diagram later on in the turn because I know I have a second one which can still allow me to flood the board with my boss monsters should I need it later on down the line. So you're basically technically playing like 5 field spells. you've technically got 3 Warzone and 2 Diagram, and then you can probably bump them up by 1 because if you consider the set rotation to be an accessible card or not. It really is up to you. You can cut this out, but what I do quite like about set rotation is later on, if you do include the side deck of cards, stuff like Necro Valley, because you don't really need to worry about your graveyard so much if you cut down the Ryu-Ges, or after you've already used the Ryu-Ges Warzone and some in the back and everything else, then you can drop a Necro Valley on your opponent, and that can be quite damaging because there are cards like the Haggard Lizardo, Splash Mage that want to move cards from the graveyard, and you're able to negate them very easily. The same in the Ryu-Ge matchup as well, is they have a lot of cards that want to attach cards from the graveyard, and you're like, no, Necro Valley says, no go. It does also open up the option that if your opponent wants to be playing field spells, so again, the Ryu-Ge matchup and even the Malice matchup, you can give them like Gateway of Chaos or a card that they can't activate, like Secret Village of the Spellcasters, so that if they have to flip it up to activate it in order to then start using their field spell, they're going to be locked out anyway. So you really put them in a catch-22 scenario that causes them a lot of issues. And then for the last of the Ryu cards, we do play the one Realm and the one Dino Domains and the one Worm Winds. Now the Worm Winds is the ideal one you want to be going for, because this does give you a one-sided macro. The biggest downside of both of the Ryu-Ge kind of continuous spell cards is they don't really synergize with the true Dracos. And what I mean by that is you don't ever want to be tributing these off to summon down your true Draco monsters, because we don't have a way to get these back from the graveyard into the deck. That's the issue. The Ryu-Ges want to spin these back from the board into the deck rather than the graveyard into the deck. So that's why playing the water one wouldn't be the end of the world if you wanted to, and it would still give you a couple of options to play around with. It really does come up to your personal preference. And like I said, I was trying to cut the space down so that I didn't go too wild with the deck count. But the idea is you've got your Dino Domain, which is your aggressive option, and you've got your Worm Winds, which is your defensive option. So being able to play one of each of those seems to kind of fit the bill nicely. If you do get into a situation where these are the only continuous spell cards you have, by all means tribute them off. But the idea is the benefit that you can have a Worm Winds set up ready to go during your opponent's turn. And then when it comes back to your turn, you go, right, okay, cool, tributing off, bring down your Dynamite Knight, because you're going to be pushing for your OTK. That's kind of the benefit you're going to be looking for. Moving on to the True Draco cards themselves, you're pretty much going to be maxing out on these where at all possible. So triple Dynamite Knight, so this is obviously going to get you direct access to your trap cards, and I might as well show you the trap cards in conjunction. So of course you'll be playing triple of the Apocalypse. This card's probably like the best one in my opinion. So this one you can activate during the damage step, and one thing that I learned early doors with True Dracos is if you activate this during the damage step and you tribute off the True Draco that your opponent is attacking, they don't get to redeclare because it happens in the damage step when you do it during damage calculation, which is actually a massive thing to help. But the other is it halves all the current attack of their face-up monsters, and then of course during your opponent's main phase you get to immediately after the effect resolves tribute a True Draco or True King monster. So that just gives you more access to get your Ignis Heats onto the board and get your access to your Majesties as well. The last two track cards we're playing is two of the returns, because the return just gives you the ability to constantly keep giving you back Draco fodder or tribute fodder on the board. So again, if these cards are sent from the field zone to from the spell and trap zones to the graveyard, you get to target a monster on the field and destroy it, which is really important. You can't activate. You cannot activate the following effects of True King in the same chain. So it means obviously you can't go Chain Link 1, target a True Draco or True King in my graveyard and special summon it in defense, and then also during your opponent's turn at the exact same Chain Link 2, tribute that said monster to tribute summon. You can still go, okay, cool, in the first chain bring back, and then in a brand new chain tribute it off. But that's the benefit you got to keep in mind. You can't special summon for the rest of the turn, which is absolutely fine because you're only going to be activating this during your turn, so that's one thing you do need to keep in mind. During your opponent's turn, so that's one thing you need to keep in mind. We're then playing triple Ignis Heat. Now this is one that's going to give you access to your spell cards. The spell cards are probably a little bit more important because that's going to be your draw power, and that's also going to be your recycle power as well, which is really important, and your back row out or hate. So the spell cards, of course, we're maxing out on these. You've got your triple heritage. So this is your draw power. This gives you the ability that during your main phase, you get to draw cards equal to the number of True Draco and True King card types, monster spells and traps that were sent from the field to the graveyard this turn. During your main phase, you get to immediately after this effect resolves, tribute summon one True Draco or True King monster face up. If this card is sent from the spell and trap zone to the graveyard, target spell trap on the field and destroy it. And then following that up, we are playing triple Disciples. So obviously Disciples lets you target 3 True Draco or 2 True King cards in the graveyard, shuffle them into the deck and then draw 1 card. So that's how you're going to be able to recycle your spells and traps and even your monsters for the massive grind game. It has the exact same effect that if it is, during your main phase, you get to use the effect to tribute summon a True Draco, and it also gives you the ability that if it leaves the field, you get to pop one of the back row. So the one card that does clash, but I absolutely love it, I think it's such a great card for Monarchs and True Dracos and everything else in between, is of course Monarch Stormforth. Now, this is the only issue with the extra deck access, but remember, this is during the turn you activate. You can't special summon monsters from the extra deck, which is absolutely fine, because when you're trying to spam the board with your Ryu-Ge cards, they're all coming from the grave deck and banishment. They're not coming from the extra deck unless you want to use Mastava, and honestly, you don't need to use the Mastava. There are other ways around playing this, because if you do activate Monarch Stormforth to tribute off one of your opponent's monsters, whether you do it during your turn or your opponent's turn, because quick play, set it, True King return, get rid of one of their monsters, it's one of the best ways to interrupt your opponent, because your opponent just can't be prepared for a Stormforth. You activate Stormforth, it doesn't target the monster or anything like that, and it lets you tribute at any point when you have the access capability to do so. So when you activate True King's Return, you'll be able to go like activate Stormforth during the draw phase, and then straight away they're living under a bit of a cosh, because they're like, at any point, I can flip a True King's Return or activate a True King's Return or even a Apocalypse to then tribute their monster to summon my monster down, which is absolutely devastating. Not to mention that going second as well, I can activate Stormforth, just use my normal summon to tribute off one of their monsters, and they can't respond to it, they can't do anything with it. Yes, of course, they would need to negate the Monarch Stormforth, but Monarch Stormforth is activate, so if they negate the activation, you can activate another one, which is absolutely insane, and you just go, cool, activate this, and they're like, oh, well, I've got a Phantom of Yugioh on the board, and you're like, okay, whatever. Tributive, off you go. Like, it's kind of like a kaiju, which is why it's so good against stuff like the Dark Fluid or the Terahertz, sorry. And it's also very good against a Detonator, because the Detonator can't respond to deal with this. So what you do is you go Stormforth during the draw phase, and they're like, okay, cool, well, that's coming. And you just go tribute off Detonator, summon down Majesty, for example. And then they're like, ah, crap. Speaking of which, 2 Majesty. So you can play 3 of this if you want to. Honestly, I don't think you absolutely need to. 2 is more than enough. This is the one that when you tribute it, you get to search, or not when you tribute it, but when your opponent activates a card or effect, while you control this tribute summon monster, you get to add a True Draco or a True King monster from the deck to the hand. So this one searches you out your Ignis and your Dynamite Knight, which is really cool, and will search you out your Masterpiece, hopefully, again, one day. All of the True Dracos have the exact same effect. You're allowed to tribute summon them by using Face Up. Tributing continuous spell or trap cards you control. So that's where you get your Dynamite Knights, your Apocalypses and everything else to tribute them off to pop cards and everything along those lines. So the benefit of something like that is you activate Monarch Stormforth, you can set any of your spells and traps. You could, if you wanted to, tribute them off to then pop a Detonator or anything else like that. So it kind of really does hurt your opponent. And then the last kind of consistency cards and then floodgate cards. I'm playing 2 Time Terror Morganite. The benefit of this one is the only monsters that activate in your hand is if you want to use the Ryu-Ge's hand effects. So you're probably going to be using them turn 1 if you've hard opened them or searched them. And then after that point on, you don't care about using them because you don't want them in your hand. And the worms you're going to be searching off of the back of that will be your True Dracos. So you don't care about that little restriction. But what this does then give you is it allows you to draw 2 cards instead of 1 during your normal draw phase. It lets you conduct 2 normal summons or sets per turn, not just 1. So you just keep spamming the ball with your True Draco monsters. And then, of course, if you do get into more of these, you can banish this card and then from the graveyard and discard a Time Terror Morganite. Your opponent cannot activate monster effects when you normal summon this turn. So very niche kind of element, but it's just the idea is that once you've activated a Time Terror Morganite, it's only going to be a matter of time that you're just going to keep burning through your deck, spamming the ball with your True Draco monsters, and then pushing for the OTK. The last 3 cards that we are main decking is Skill Drain, Skill Drain, and Skill Drain. Skill Drain, Power Sink Stone, and Power Sink Stone, because Skill Drain is a 1. But the idea behind this deck is you are playing insanely powerful boss monsters in the form of the Ryu-Ges, all at 3k themselves each. You've then got your True Dracos, which range from 23, 24, and 26. So all of them are going to have their own baseline power, and they don't really care if Skill Drain locks them out, or even Power Sink Stone, and then even if they do become an issue, you just tribute them off with your True Dracos. But the idea is with Power Sink Stone, each time a monster effect is activated, you place a Spellstone counter on this card, maximum 2. While this card has 2 spell counters on it, neither player can activate the effects of face-up monsters on the field. Also, the effects of face-up monsters on the field are negated, and then once per turn during the end phase, if this has any spell counters on them, you remove them. So the idea is you're going to have this active during your opponent's turn. You activate your True Draco cards when they activate a card. So each time a monster effect is activated, you place a spell counter on it. So they activate, spell counter, True Draco, spell counter. That's it, straight away. Skill Drain is now in effect. The idea is you're slowing your opponent down. You're playing with 3 skill drains. If they become an issue to you, you get rid of them when you tribute them off. You're just going to be able to get so much resource. It's absolutely insane. And then Skill Drain is obviously pay a K and do the exact same thing. When it comes to the side deck, what the best thing that the True Dracos give you the ability for is to play your floodgates of choice. You can play Rivalries, you can play Tikaboo if you want to. You can also consider playing stuff like Anti-Spell Fragrance because you don't mind setting your True Draco spells because then you can still just tribute them off and go from there. It gives you a lot of flexibility for the control aspect, which is why you'll also notice that throughout this entire build, there isn't a single hand trap involved. Now, the idea behind that is because we want to be control as much as we possibly can. And then when we start looking into our side deck again, we're just going to be going for more control cards. We're going to be going for cards that allow us to break our opponent's board and then set up our control state and everything else in between. Speaking of which, once we get into the extra deck, I'll show you the only card you're ever really going to want to summon, and that is basically just Ryu-Ge. So remember, when you use the field spell for the Ryu-Ges, you do lock yourself into only being able to special summon worms, sea serpents, dragons, and dinos. So this is one of the best XYZs you can go for. Of course, you can play the trains in the extra deck if you want to, but they are machines, which means you won't be able to summon them until the next turn. And when you do something like that, the only reason you'd be summoning that is if you're going into a time con option, and if you feel you're going to consistently go into a time con option because of a deck like this, then you'd put them in. But I feel that you can spam the board with strong enough monsters to just deal with it outright. And then from that point on, everything else is just a basic toolbox. Now, what I mean by that is you're playing like Zeus, a Typhon, and then, of course, because you have so much flexibility in your extra deck after an IP Masquerade and an SP Little Knight, you can now just play targets that you will send with Ultimate Slayer from the side deck. So you've got your Agitator for your XYZ matchups, you've got your Ferrojeet, and if you wanted to, you can also play the Link 4 Live Twin for the Link monsters. You're also, for your Synchros, we've got 3 options on that one. You've got the Malong to give you a nice little bounce. You've got the Omega, and the Omega can be very helpful to recycle some of the cards from the graveyard that you can't naturally recycle with your True Dracos. You've got your Pack Bit Agnista. And then for your fusions, you've got the one Garura for the draw, and you've got the Natis for the pop. And the last 2 cards we are playing is the one Nightmare Phoenix and Reaperdonkus, just because, you know, flexibility. And the Reaperdonkus is if you choose to side deck in a Protoss when you're going into your side deck. Now, I haven't got a side deck put together, but the idea is off of the back of the side deck, what you're going to be looking for, exactly as I've pretty much mentioned, is you're going to be looking for those one-off power play continuous trap cards, stuff like Summon Limit, Anti-Spell Fragrance, Rivalry. There can only be one. Those straight away like are 4 control spell card, trap cards. Then you'd be looking at a Protoss because it's easily searchable, so that's 5 cards already. You now still have 10 more cards to play with. Those 10 cards can very easily be stuff like Dusters, Lightning Storms, and then you start considering Ultimate Slayers at 3. You could look at the Triple Tactics Thrust, Triple Tactics Talons. You just have so many different options on that one. You just adapt it to your environment. The idea behind this deck is it is definitely more, I wouldn't say fun because your opponent's not going to enjoy it, but it's one of them updates that a lot of people ask me about. What about True Dracos with the new Ryu-Ges? How does it kind of synergize? How does it work? And this is the basic idea of it. You're basically replacing the loss of two diagrams with the Ryu cards and the Ryu element, because they will search you out your worms. They are a different way of being able to get you direct access to your Ignis cards. Remembering that once you've got your True Draco field spell in play, it kind of protects your True Dracos from just being punched twice. Well, punched once and then off the board. They have to be attacked twice, and a lot of people forget that. It's one of them ones where True Dracos have been in the shadows for long enough now that if you bring it back, your opponent's going to be like, what do these cards do? I weren't playing when they were around, or, oh, they do that. So when you're looking at the Ryu and the Ryu-Ges and everything else they provide, if you're looking down a control element, you've got 3 really good control options for you. You've got the Dino, you've got the True Dracos, you've got the Dynamist, and of course you've got your Umi control. So that's one control element. For your combo elements, you've got normal Dinos, you've also got Invoked, and then you also can consider Sword Soul as well. So there's just so much variety that this adds, and this doesn't even include Voiceless Voice as well when you want to take that into consideration, and that's something that I'm still looking to put together once I get the rest of the cards. Anyway, that is it for the entire profile. If you do have any questions at all, by all means, please put them in the comments down below. Let me know what you think of the deck. I think it's going to be a very, very fun deck, and it will catch a lot of people off guard if you do rock up to locals with a deck like this, and they're going to be like, oh, damn, that's still a thing. And then you've got it all pre-prepared, ready to go, that if Masterpiece does make a surprise return back in April, you already add an additional boss monster to this build, and you're like, yeah, cool, we're cooking. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. Till next time, as absolutely always, stay safe, and of course, happy dueling.